Good morning. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to our session about capacity building coaching. Great energy already. um, Today, we're going to talk to you a little bit about capacity building coaching, which coaching itself is a research-based practice, but coaching also supports the implementation of research-based practices. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about that. First, we'd like to get to know a little bit about you. So this is a time where you're actually allowed to use your cell phones in a class. So take out your cell phone and send us a text. Sorry, I'm going to go. Oops, that one went forward too far. We'll start with, where are you from? So the number that you are sending a text to is 37607. And let us know where in Arizona or otherwise you are from. If you're from northern Arizona, your message would be 351881. And this is a fun little tool because it should tell us right away after you send your text some information about you.
And just so you know, this is a free tool, so if any of you are classroom teachers or you're doing presentations yourself, you can pull up to 40 participants and you get these instantaneous results. So it's a lot of fun.
Okay, so from what we have so far, it looks like we have a lot of people from northern Arizona, central Arizona, some from southern Arizona. Oh, here comes central. I think somebody added to another area. Great. This is just to give us an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. And we have one more now that you're experts on this tool. What is your current position? Okay, so send a text to 37607. Let us know what you're currently doing now. Okay, so we have some teachers, therapists, administrators. We'll give you about one more minute to finish sending a text if you haven't done so already. From the other category, what positions do people have besides those listed here? Anybody like to share? Social worker? Anybody else? Voc Rehab Transition Coordinator? Early Intervention Technical Assistance Specialist? Great, we have some counselors as well. So good, just kind of gives us a feel of where everybody's coming from and in what setting you might be looking at doing some coaching. A little bit about Sandra and I. My name is Tracy Sreedharan, and I'm currently the coaching coordinator for the Arizona Department of Education Exceptional Student Services. I'm also a certified school psychologist, so I have experience working in large urban schools in the Phoenix area. I went through capacity building coaching training about 6 years ago and found it extremely beneficial. Started doing some coaching for teams that went through our team trainings, and I now coordinate that program, the training program and the use of coaches for our school teams. I'll let Sandra.
Okay, and my name is Sandra Laine, and I am also in Exceptional Student Services, and I'm a program specialist for reading. And so I do a lot of professional development for reading and monitor professional development grants within the department. I also worked, actually formerly with Tracy at one point, in a urban district down in Phoenix. Had a lot of varied experiences in the district. I was a special ed teacher, a regular ed teacher, a special ed coach, a literacy coach, and an assistant principal before I joined the Department of Ed.
Okay. So also to get to know a little bit more about you, think about yourself and your knowledge of coaching, maybe knowledge and experience of coaching. If you were to rate yourself on a scale of 0 to 5, with 0 being little to no knowledge and 5 meaning a high level of knowledge, how would you rate yourself? show us with your hands on a scale of 0 to 5 your knowledge and experience of coaching. Yes, yes, yes. Just put your hands up. Great, great. 0.5, we have a 0.5 too. So somebody with a lot to learn, great. Wonderful. And even those people who have experience with coaching know that there's always more to learn and to develop their skills. The last thing I want to ask you is, how many people have any training in coaching? What kind of training have you had? Oh, great. Capacity building coaching. Did I see somebody over here? School-wide positive behavior support. Capacity building coaching. Anybody else? Trina? Instructional coaching with Jim Knight. Wonderful. Great. So as we're talking about some of these topics, if those of you who have some background and experience have something to add, please feel free to do that. Yes, thank you. One thing that we know about research also is that adult learners need to be actively engaged in their learning. So Sandra and I have created a presentation for you that allows you the opportunity to interact with your peers and share ideas with each other and with us. So we would like to thank you in advance for your willingness to engage in this process with us this morning. And here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit about why coaching, what is the value in coaching. We're going to talk about how do you define coaching, some research on some models of coaching, and talk to you more about capacity building coaching. Sorry, this clicker just moves fast.
Okay. So the forward button. Okay. So, why coach? Everyone is doing it, but why? So, what are the benefits of coaching? So, in a way to understand coaching is really to think of it as a metaphor. Think of the stagecoach as a metaphor for coaching. Like a stagecoach moves a person from one place to another, moves them from where they are to where they want to be. Coaching really does the same thing. A teacher may be in, one particular place, but want to be doing something very different in their classroom or something, or implementing an evidence-based practice within their classroom. And a coach is really there to assist them with that process. Coaching also really supports someone learning something new. That's what a lot of the research on coaching says. That's what the research has been done on in learning evidence-based practices or implementing those practices within the classroom. So, and really from a teacher's perspective, when you think about coaching, or anyone's perspective, from a personal perspective, why wouldn't you want to coach? It's really your own personal staff developer. They're there to help you either broaden your thinking or broaden your instructional practice or move your instructional practice to where you want it to be. Okay, and also when you're thinking about from a school perspective, if you're an administrator, you have your professional development budget, why wouldn't you put money toward instructional coaching or coaching of any kind to help move your teachers from where they are to where they want to be? When you're implementing professional development on a school-wide basis, it's not necessarily meeting the needs of each and every one of your teachers at all times, where coaching really is. That's the purpose behind coaching. Now, as far as the classroom, we know that there are positive outcomes for coaching for both teachers and students. Teachers, when they are coached, the evidence suggests that it's building the teacher's self-efficacy, or basically their belief that they're effective in the classroom, that what they're doing for students actually has some merit and that it's effective. And when teachers have that self-efficacy, there's usually an outcome for students. And that's really ultimately what we want. We want that outcome for kids. So again, why coach? It builds the teacher's self-efficacy, which in turn has an impact on student achievement. This is an example, this is a graph of some research done by Bush. This is some of the earliest research on coaching. Back in 1984, Granted, it's old, but it's still very applicable, and you'll see where some of the later research continues to support his findings. So what this explains is the rate of the application of new learning. With a workshop only, you only get about 10%. 10% of the participants in your workshop will implement new learning based on what they've done. So they come, they sit in your workshop, they may have paid a $300 registration fee, but if that's all they do when they go home, maybe about 10% of them will implement that new learning. If we include modeling in that, you might get about another 2 to 3% that will implement that new learning. Still, not really very effective, is it? You add practice, so the participants have time to practice, we're still not even at 20%. You add feedback into that, where you're giving that participant feedback after their practice, we're still not even at 20%. When you add peer coaching, that rate jumps up to 95%. So coaching is very beneficial if you want to see the impact for what you're doing or what the teachers are learning in a professional development or a workshop. Now, this is just a continuation or the next study basically on this same topic. And this was by Joyce and Showers. And they're probably some of the most well-known researchers on this topic. And you'll see this, I've seen a lot of different research studies and a lot of different articles that I've read. When I've read articles on collaboration, they're quoted on this. So their research was, they looked at it even further and looked at the difference between knowledge, skill, and transfer. So when teachers are just studying theory or participants are just studying theory, you get about a 10% of them that are obtaining the knowledge from that training. And only about 5% of them are gaining skill. So what does that look like in the classroom? Only about 5% are making some impact on that. And then by the time when you add demonstrations, again, knowledge is about 30, skill goes up to about 20, but we still have no transfer to what's happening in the classroom. When you think about just adding practice to that, again, we go up to about 60% for knowledge, 60% for skill, and now we're at about 5% of the participants actually transferring this to their classroom. Still not very effective, not really what we want when we're paying for teachers or we're paying for our own professional development. And then, but when you add peer coaching to that, we go up to about 95% for all, for skill, for knowledge, skill, and transfer. So again, why coach? I think the research is obvious as to why we would coach. And then another reason to coach. If you are in education of any sort, which I think we all are, differing roles, but we all have experience in education. And if you've been in education for anything more than about a year, you understand that there are new initiatives and new policies coming at us every single year. Sometimes it's even more frequently than that. So just a couple things that are going on now. We have Race to the Top. We have the new ESEA waiver. We have the A to F labels in the state of Arizona. We have Common Core. We have PARC assessments. It's just one right after the other. And teachers are feeling like, what do I do? And a coach is really that person there to support them and support the administration in the school through the implementation of all of these new initiatives and policies. Okay, so we're going to move on to the definition.
Okay, so I think everybody has a general concept of coaching. It's not a term that's unfamiliar to people, but many people define it in different ways. So we're going to start with you, and we're going to ask you, how do you define coaching? So you have some cards at your table, some little blue cards. You're welcome to use that or any scrap paper you'd like to use. Write down some keywords or phrases that describe coaching to you. Take about a minute to do that.
And you've got enough that you can write one idea on each card. And then if you would put that card to the center because you're going to talk about those together.
Okay, take about another 10, 15 seconds to finish up your last thoughts. It's okay if you didn't get everything down on paper. Okay, now with your colleagues at your table, talk about some of those key concepts of coaching that you identified and what you have in common as a group. What are some of those concepts that multiple people consider to be elements of coaching? Once you've had a few minutes to discuss, go ahead and list them on that chart paper at your table, and there's some markers for you to do that.
And
Okay, take about another 30 seconds to finish up your list. Go ahead and post it on the wall. Okay, as you finish up, go ahead and post your poster on the wall, and I'd like to ask everybody to stand up. And we're just going to take a walk around the room. So stand up and take a look, walking around at some of the other ideas on the other posters that the other teams generated. Okay, as you come back to your seats, what are some things that you noticed were common among everybody's concepts of coaching? What were some things that you saw? Modeling. Almost everybody had modeling. Feedback. Observing. Listening. Collaborating. Mentoring was on there. Great. Well, thank you for engaging your brains and thinking up from your experience some key concepts of coaching. We're going to talk a little bit about a few different models of coaching. And as we do that, listen to the language that we're using to see if some of those key ideas that you mentioned are included in those models. And as we progress a little bit further, we'll share with you a definition of coaching as it's defined in capacity building coaching as well. I'm going to ask our lovely facilitator, Laura, to pass out a handout for you. We recognize that we mostly have pictures in our PowerPoint, but if you would like to take notes, we have a page on which you can do that. Thank you. So thinking about coaching and different models of coaching, what types of coaching have you heard of before? Throw some out there. I said this to my husband yesterday. He said, I have no idea, Tracy. He's an engineer. And I said, you watch sports, right? There's athletic coaching. Oh, he's like, oh, okay. What are some other types of coaching? Anything you could think of. Peer coaching, which is one we'll talk about today. Instructional coaching, which we will talk about today. Even life coaching, leadership coaching, blended coaching. There's so many different types of coaching. Cognitive coaching, which we'll talk about today. So today we're going to talk about the models of coaching that are studied in the research and most common in educational settings. And we're going to start off by talking about peer coaching. Again, that clicker's so fast. It just skips right over. Okay, so in your handouts, we've kind of outlined for you some different key points, if you wanted to remember them, that you could record on your handout. And one of those is who the model of coaching was developed by, and peer coaching was developed by Beverly Showers and Bruce Joyce. And you saw a reference to them earlier in a slide by Sandra. And essentially, this model of coaching developed back starting in the 70s. They were looking at evaluations of professional development and realizing that only about 10% of participants, teachers, were actually implementing the strategies that were being taught. I think our keynote was mentioning some of this concern earlier, that research to practice challenge. And Showers and Joyce hypothesized that by adding coaching component to that training would increase the transfer and application of that knowledge and skill, which you saw earlier was actually accurate. So the purpose of peer coaching, again, is to facilitate the transfer of knowledge and new skills into instructional practices. Some of the characteristics of peer coaching would be collaborative planning, teachers working together while planning instruction. It would be shared resource development, working on materials, watching one another work with students, and thinking about the impact of their behavior on students' learning. So this is very much a collaborative process between peers. And what the research has shown, a lot of this research was done early on in the 80s, was that there is, in fact, a greater transfer of application of new learning to the classroom. Teachers who were using peer coaching or in peer coaching relationships were more likely to apply the skills in their practice. They were more likely to apply them appropriately. They had greater long-term retention of those strategies and continued long-term use of appropriate use of those strategies. So very powerful stuff. I think really Showers and Joyce were one of the first to emphasize coaching as a key ingredient to effective professional development. Okay. Moving on to cognitive coaching. Has anybody in this room been through a cognitive coaching training? No, not. Very powerful as well. That was developed also in the early 80s by Arthur Costa and Robert Garmston. And initially what their focus was teacher supervision process. You know, a principal would come into a teacher's classroom, observe a lesson, and then with a little checklist say, Laura, this is what you did well, this is what you need to work on. And they were wanting to shift to having teachers be more self-directed in their learning. And what Costa and Garmston realized is that this model applied to a much broader arena than just teacher evaluation. And the purpose of cognitive coaching is to produce self-directed persons with the cognitive capacity for high performance, both independently and as members of a community. If you were going to define what does self-directed mean, what would you say? What does it mean to be a self-directed person? Striving for continuous improvement in education. Oh, taking initiative. Independent, increasing knowledge. Say that again? Yes, self-assess. Right, a person who's self-directed has a clear goal of where they want to, what they want to achieve, how they might get there. They're using data to analyze that process. So cognitive coaching supports an individual in becoming more self-directed. Also, in the definition, in the mission, they talk about cognitive capacity. So this is really what separates cognitive coaching from other types of coaching, is that not only do I want to help you achieve the goals that you've set for yourself, I also want to help you improve your cognitive capacity. So you're evaluating, you're inferring, your cognitive skills is also a focus of this model. The characteristics, which would take a long time to discuss, so I'm just going to highlight, would be there's a use of 3 different coaching maps. So this is conversation between the coach and the coachee involving planning, reflecting, or problem resolving. And there's some tools that the cognitive coaches use in that capacity. Regarding the research on cognitive coaching, I have a resource here, and we have some resources up at the front of the room for you to take a look at. on different different references for coaching, but Jenny Edwards is a researcher who has compiled a list and summarizes results of research studies on cognitive coaching and the impact. And so I'm just going to touch on those for you briefly. There's evidence that there's increased student test scores. Teachers grew in teaching efficacy. That's something Sandra mentioned earlier. Their belief that they can do it, that they can create learning in their students. Impacted teacher thinking to be more reflective and complex, which makes sense, right? Given that in this model there's a focus on cognitive capacity. Teachers were more satisfied in their positions. School cultures are more professional, more teacher collaboration, and benefits to teachers professionally and personally, and to others outside of the field. So if you didn't get all those down, that's okay. If you go to the Cognitive Coaching website, which we have in our resource list, you can find them all there too. And you can take a look at this reference if you'd like as well. And I'll let Sandra talk to you a little bit about instructional coaching.
Okay. Instructional coaching seems to be one of the models that's really most prevalent in schools today. And instructional coaching was developed by Jim Knight. And again, you'll notice the similarities. It was developed out of the need to see if teachers were implementing evidence-based practices or those research-proven practices, and that they were implementing those effectively. And when Jim Knight, when the development of instructional coaching really was built on the theory of a partnership approach, that this is a partnership between the teacher and the coach. And so that theory is based on some of the principles, on some of these principles, one of those being equality. The teacher and the coach are both equal in this process. The coach doesn't know any more than the teacher or doesn't hold any more weight in this relationship than the teacher. That there's choice. The teachers have a choice in what and how they learn. Again, this is not a process that's really dictated to the teacher or the coachee. They have a voice in this process as well. That there's dialogue. There's this back and forth conversation between the teacher and the coach that is really ongoing. There's reflection. The teacher is able to really think about what they've learned and speak about what they learned, and they have the time to do that reflection. And they have the choice to say, you know what, this isn't an idea that I think is going to work for me in my classroom, or I need the time to really implement it and see whether it works, and I can then change my mind and say, yeah, it's great, or no, it's just not for me, okay? There's also the concept of praxis that this principle is based on, that there's time for the teacher to practice the skills that they're learning, and in a non-threatening environment where they do receive some feedback, but again, it's through that conversation and through that dialogue with the coach. And that there's reciprocity. The knowledge and expertise of the teacher is just as important as the knowledge and expertise of the coach. And instructional coaching really demonstrates a respect for the professionalism of teaching. And if you've been in teaching at all, you know that sometimes that's not always evident. And so I think I have worked with a coach and I have been a coach. And I think it really does value both of the parties. And I'm a strong advocate for it. Tracy has coached me a number of times. When I need coaching, I go to her, and she coaches me through a number of issues. And so I really think it's a great practice in schools, and it's a great practice personally and professionally. And instructional coaches they work in partnership with teachers, and they work in partnership to implement those proven practices through collaboration, through planning, through modeling, observing, and feedback. And a lot of those, when you were discussing coaching, I see a lot of those out there, a lot of those same ideas. So some of the research on instructional coaching, and again, the research there's not overwhelming research, there's not a lot of research, but what has been done on instructional coaching so far is very similar to some of the previous research you've seen, that implementation rates increase when coaching is added. And through Jim Knight's research, they found that about 85% of teachers or participants in professional development are implementing those practices within their classroom as a result of coaching. Without coaching, those numbers are a lot different. So if you're getting about 85% of an implementation rate or a rate of new learning and implementation in the classroom, that's really beneficial, okay? Our next one, thank you, because I forgot the clicker over here. Next one is literacy coaching. And literacy coaching is very similar to instructional coaching in a form of that. But this was developed out of No Child Left Behind and Reading First. Reading First is really what brought literacy coaches to schools. They were trained through Reading First initiatives. And the purpose is similar to instructional coaching, but it's really focused on literacy skills and literacy assessment and those best practices in literacy. So again, it's job embedded. Literacy coaches and instructional coaches are usually placed on a campus. It's not somebody that travels from school to school. They're on your campus, and you're building that relationship with that person on a daily basis or weekly. And literacy coaches really need specialized knowledge in literacy. If you are going to be a literacy coach, you really need to have a solid background in reading and that development of language. Very few studies, again, have been done on literacy coaching, but some of them were done out of Reading First. And what they found was that when teachers had improved test scores when they worked with a literacy coach and had specialized training. Their scores were not as high when they worked with a literacy coach but did not have the specialized training. So it really is in combination with the training and the coaching where they saw the impact on instruction and an impact on student scores. Okay. So just kind of to sum it all up here, sum the research up for you. There is evidence on the outcomes of all types of coaching. And that evidence really leads to improved professional practice and increased teacher efficacy, or really that belief in one's ability to be effective in the classroom and have an impact on student achievement. But as coaching continues to be a developing field, there's still, and coaching research is still emerging, but a lot of the research to date has been more qualitative and not truly experimental research. So that's an area that the field really still needs to work on, but it's been difficult to make those causal relationships to date with the research that has been done. So the research has shown, as I said, that there's a direct impact on teacher efficacy, but it's difficult to make that link from coaching to student achievement. Okay? So we're going to go on. Our next activity is we're going to discuss the foundational skills for coaching. So you're going to go back to those little blue sheets of paper on your table, and you're going to work with your table group. Okay? And some of these you've already listed, but I want you to think a little bit more now about what you've heard and what are those foundational skills that the coach needs to have in order to be effective. And so you've got the pieces of paper, one idea on each, and we'll give you about a minute to write down those foundational skills that you believe a coach needs to have.
Take about another 30 seconds to finish up on your own. And then when you're done, go ahead and start discussing a little bit at your table. Share your ideas with your colleagues.
Okay, so what we're going to do at this point is we're going to go around the room and give us an idea of what the consensus was at your table and what those, an example of just a couple of the skills that you discussed. So let's go ahead and start over here at this table. What were, okay, yes. So they discussed knowledge and the concept of active listening, which I'm still working on. So if I repeat something incorrectly, let me know. I'm always working on that. That's just a skill I need to continue to refine and enhance. Okay, back here at this table. Thank you. Were people able to hear? Yes. It's a small enough room that I think we can. Yes, back here. Okay, great, great. And next table right up here. Sure, yes, because a lot of them have been covered, yes. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, very good. Mhm. And it looks like knowledge has been pretty common so far. And it's interesting, we'll talk more about that the more we get into capacity building coaching. But different models view knowledge with differing importance. Instructional coaching and literacy coaching, you have to be credible. You have to be able to speak to those practices that are evidence-based. As when Tracy was introducing cognitive coaching is having the particular content knowledge is not necessarily as important with that model because it is about the questioning and developing that knowledge within the teacher, within the coachee. So, okay, go ahead, this table. Mm-hmm. Yes. It takes a lot to be a coach, doesn't it? It's not an easy process. Yes, one more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, yes. Not as effective. It really helps so that it's an ongoing relationship. And I was wondering if that might have been where that table was going to go when they said consistency. You were at consistency of message, and my thought when I heard consistency was consistency of the process, too, that you need to be working regularly with that teacher or with the coach in order to continue to build that knowledge and gain the knowledge. A couple of them that we've also we also believe our foundational skills are questioning and paraphrasing, which we'll talk more about in the capacity building coaching. And I think we did hear about the trust relationship. And then one more thing I'll say about the feedback. Again, the feedback is part of certain models of coaching, and we'll talk more about the feedback as we continue with the capacity building coaching. But that goes along with the content knowledge, having that specific knowledge about whether it be math, whether it be literacy. The feedback comes with that. If the coach is very skilled in that topic, then feedback is okay, is a part of the process. But when the coach is really working on helping you to develop your cognitive and your thought processes, then feedback is not as much a part of the model. Okay, so I'm going to hand this over to Tracy, and she's going to start talking about capacity building coaching.
Okay, so capacity building coaching is actually a training that was developed about 10 years ago that came out of a need to have some trained coaches work for the Department of Education in our team trainings and exceptional student services. So it really builds upon those foundational skills, those common elements of the different models of coaching. And it supports the implementation of evidence-based practices. So the definition of coaching, capacity building coaching as it's defined there, is a non-judgmental communication process where individual or team thinking is mediated through strategic questioning and paraphrasing. So I think going back to some of your ideas, talking about a non-judgmental process, I heard that in a couple different places. It really is a communication process. You definitely have to have those communication skills to be an effective coach, specifically questioning and paraphrasing, but there are many others as well. So if we're talking about coaching, we're talking about a coaching cycle typically might look like this. Somebody is planning for an event. Perhaps I was going to coach Sandra over here, and she's planning some professional development. She and I might sit down and have a conversation about that to really help her be specific about her goals and how she's going to accomplish that. She has the professional development occur. Maybe I'm there to observe, or a teacher giving a lesson, and the coach is there observing that lesson. And afterwards, there's a conversation to reflect on that event. So we have some tools for our coaches to help them during those conversations. And this is an example of our planning template. I know it's crooked. We were trying to be artistic, sorry. So you tilt your head, you can read the words. But basically, we don't have the questions listed on there because that is the coach's language to develop those questions. You know, there's not a cookbook approach, I think, like our keynote presenter said earlier. It's really going to be individualized to the person you're working with and to who you are as the coach. So in a planning conversation, the coach is going to ask some questions about goals. You know, what are you hoping to accomplish with this lesson? How will you know you're successful? What will that look like? You know, how will you achieve that? What data might help you in assessing the effectiveness of that lesson or activity? What concerns might you have? And what do you hope to learn about yourself as a teacher or as administrator? Or what do you hope to learn about yourself? Leave it open from this experience. I think that last piece is where we really talk about developing the person and their capacity. Think about yourself with a conversation with a friend, and you've had an opportunity to really think through what you're going to do. It's really solidifying that thought process and helping that person be prepared for what they want to accomplish. So at your table, take just about 30 seconds and each person generate one question that a coach might use in a planning conversation. One question. It could be under any of those categories. One question a coach might use. Think about a friend coming to you or a colleague and they're going to plan something. Think of one question you might ask that person to help support their thinking as they prepare to do that activity. Take a few moments to write a question. Take about 10 more seconds just to finish up your thoughts. Okay, would anybody like to share a question that they've written? Doesn't have to be. Okay. How will you know if the students learn and if you will accomplish your objective? This is before an event, right? So you're asking them ahead of time. Right. Great, thank you. Other questions, Laura? What methods do you use for data collection? Right, we want to make database decisions, right? This is what we're always encouraging. So in these planning conversations, we're giving the person the opportunity to think through what data will help them assess their effectiveness. Good. Any other questions you'd like to share? The whole group. One more. Right. Really thinking through what they're doing currently and what's working and what they might want to change. Excellent. Thank you. Great. One thing about the planning template, and I've seen this has happened to me as a coach, and I know it happens to our coaches all the time, is that if the person does not have a clear goal, and if you as the coach have not helped them clarify that goal, you feel like you're spinning in circles, and you can be talking and talking and talking and not getting anywhere. So spending a lot of time on that goal is really going to help you be effective as a coach, because otherwise, it's just a lot of talking. Okay, can you progress? Thank you. So we talked about planning, an event happens, and then we come back and have some reflecting. So again, we have some categories. This is not an exhaustive list of categories, and certainly when you're coaching, you're not necessarily going through every one of these in order every time. Again, it's based on the coachee and their needs and where their learning is at. So you might ask them, of course, how did it go? Or on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your lesson? And they give you a number, and then you might clarify ask them for further clarification. Well, why? Why did you give it that number? What does your data tell you about the activity? What patterns did you notice? What challenges came up? What surprised you? There's many different ways, again, to ask these questions. What did you learn about yourself? This is really where the learning happens for the teacher. This is where you really want them to come to that aha. Oh, and it's not you telling them you did this. It's the person identifying for themselves that meaningful experience and meaningful learning from that process. So we have a video to show you an example of somebody who went through our capacity building coaching training and later went on to do some coaching for us. And before we show you the video, I want you to think about what elements of coaching might you want to look for in this video. She's having a reflecting conversation with a teacher. So what might you want to look for while this video is playing? What about her coaching would be important to look at? For example, her questioning. What do her questioning skills look like? Are they open questions? Are they closed questions? What is an example of a closed question? Just to put a yes or no. So that doesn't really lead to further thinking, right? And certainly if you have somebody who doesn't want to be coached, it just shuts that conversation right down. So are her questions open? What are some other skills? Think back to the foundational skills you identified. Absolutely. I don't think we can put enough emphasis on that. The nonverbals. What is the coach saying or doing without talking while they're in that interaction? Excellent. What else? Strategic questioning and paraphrasing. I'm glad you said that because you will notice she does quite a lot of paraphrasing in this example. So we'll go ahead and pull up the video. It's not on yet. Okay, we're going to have to just start it over again. Sorry, we've experienced this before.
Yes. It'll only play once.
You just get to see a picture of my daughter picking peaches. Okay.
Oh my God.
I'll just do it here. She's quick on the trigger. Step away from the clicker, Sandra. Sorry. Try one more time. Okay.
good grasp on numbers right now, so I thought they would be working well with moving on. Really what I was concerned and focused about was a couple of my kids have a hard time paying attention to a lesson that's new. Things that we've done over and over again, they're real good with just continuing. But as far as staying focused for a new demonstration or a new lesson is sort of hard for them. So that was something that I definitely was a little apprehensive about, not so much the content.
So you felt really comfortable about the content, that your children knew
Yes.
the numbers, they were ready for that, but your concern was about keeping them all engaged in the activity.
It was, yes. Sometimes just sitting at the rug for a long demonstration, like I said, with something that we haven't completed before is difficult. Yes.
So when you think about this lesson that you just completed, and you think about that area that you were concerned about, that keeping them engaged, what were some strategies that you used to keep them engaged?
This time, I definitely wanted to roam around my circle, so I didn't just stay in one area. I definitely used different people to demonstrate with and kept moving around to make sure that it's almost they had to stay on their toes. And I did use those couple kids that were a concern to me. I did go and sit next to them and make them demonstrate with me, knowing that if they had to be my partner, they would have to know what was going on.
So you use proximity to really keep the kids like in line so that they're on their toes.
Yes.
And you found that to be pretty successful.
It was definitely, like I said, I used those couple that I knew I needed to peg, and yeah, it was good to make sure that I could understand that they knew what they were doing as well.
Okay. So proximity was very powerful in that lesson. Were there any other strategies that you used to really engage those students and all of your students?
I definitely tried to have them share to each other too during it. I would give a point and then ask them to tell their friend what I just said, asking them to engage with each other, making sure that they were kind of accountable for the person next to them. So that was something I've been working on.
So using like a think, pair, share, you found also very successful in this lesson.
Yes.
Okay. So when you reflect on this lesson and you think about where you're going to go next with your kids or your students, what have you gleaned from this lesson that you're going to be applying to future lessons?
I think the two strategies we just talked about, the proximity and the sharing together, I haven't used a lot of. I think their maturity is a lot better for them to handle the sharing part too. So I think that was a good experiment for me to see that does work, and I think they got a lot out of it, being able to rephrase it for themselves. So I hope to use that for sure, and always just the proximity. I think I need to roam a little more than I normally do. It's hard for them to simply focus on just me up front. So if I really need to concentrate on moving for all of my lessons, not just math.
So when you think about you as a teacher, you really realize that moving around the room is very important for the students,
Yes.
for them to be on their toes, for them to be engaged. And you also learn that for them to talk with each other during the lesson is
Okay, I think that's enough to kind of give you an idea of the coaching process. What are some things you observed in that conversation? Active listening, definitely. What else did you observe? Paraphrasing. She did quite a bit of paraphrasing. She did, didn't she? She said proximity, the teacher hadn't labeled. She said think, pair, share, right? She was organizing her thinking using what the coachee had said. Any other comments, observations about this particular example? Yeah, what about the nonverbal communication? That was one thing to pay attention to. What did you notice about her nonverbal communication? Leaning in. What was that? The teacher looked relaxed, right? We have some other videos we don't have time to show you, but another example of coaching where the coach comes in and she pretty much tells the teacher what she did after a lesson. And it was a young teacher, and you just could watch her poor body language go from eager, like, I did it, I tried this lesson, to, oh. And you could read that in her body language, based on that interaction. So we just wanted to show you an example so you have a better picture of what that looks like. And we're going to go on to our last concept of the day is to talk about the communication interaction continuum. For anybody who's been through the coaching training, capacity building coaching, is this something that's still familiar to you? Did you remember learning this? Well, you will, because we're going to review it right now. So if you think about communication between a coach and a coachee in a conversation, the coach sometimes might be being direct. Sometimes they might be making statements that are evaluative. They might be consulting, they might be collaborating, or they might be in the coach role as it's defined here. So at your tables, come up with one synonym for each of those words. One synonym for each of those words. Yeah, as a group, you can come up with your ideas. Yeah, as a group. This one? No, we'll do this. Yeah, orally. Okay, let's share some ideas. What are some synonyms for direct? If you're being direct. Tell. Say it again. Aggressive? Depending on how you say it, right. Tell. What's an example of a statement that's being direct? No. Stop. Don't. Get out of the classroom now. Sometimes in issues of safety, teachers are very direct with students. How about evaluate? A synonym for evaluate. Assess. Any others besides assess? Analyze. Review. What's an example of a statement a coach might make that would be evaluative? Good job. I'm so guilty of that one. Man, I've had to work really hard at holding back saying good job, because when I say good job to you, I'm telling you what I think of you. I've elevated myself above you now, because now I get to decide if what you did was good or not. So challenging, but true. Okay, consult. A synonym for consult. Advise. What was the other one? Confer. Positive criticism, so feedback might be another one. Check for understanding. Some other synonyms of consulting. So when you're consulting, you become the expert and you're telling somebody some ideas, strategies of what to do. What might be an example of a statement a coach might make that would be consulting? How do you think that went? Seems to allow the coach the opportunity to identify that. But it's a good thought. We'll get there in just a minute. Have you tried putting Johnny in the front of the room? Now I've told you the strategy that I think you should use. Other teachers in your situation have used the following 3 strategies. I'm giving you information. I'm telling you what to do. This is where someone with expertise might be sharing that information with the coach, right? In some models of coaching. Okay, how about collaborate? A synonym for collaborate. Team. Together. Share. What might be a statement that a coach would make if they were collaborating with a coachee? You guys are so good at coaching. That's a coaching question. I wonder what would happen. Well, or consulting if you... Absolutely. And you used one of the key words that lets you know that you're collaborating is let's. Let's, we, ours. If you are going to engage in that activity with the person, then you are collaborating. But if you're a coach and you throw out let's, which again, I've been guilty of, just to be more friendly, like, oh, let's do this. I'm not going to do it. You're going to do it, right? So it's kind of a false promise on my part if I'm using that language and I'm not truly collaborating with you. Okay, coach. How about a synonym for coach? Teach, mentor. Sometimes people say facilitate. And I've already heard some coaching questions. There was a coaching question here. What was your question again? How did you think it went? How did you think it went? It's totally up to the coach to give that answer. It's not the coach, the coachee. It's not the coach giving any information to the coach. It's really allowing that person to decide for themselves what they think and to evaluate themselves. So I know you haven't had much time to practice with this, but we're going to do a little activity. And Sandra's going to pass out some cards to you, and you're going to stand up. Each of the cards has either one of these words on the continuum or an example. Okay? And after she finishes passing out the cards, we'll let you stand up and find somebody with a matching card that would go with your either comment or area on the continuum. And while she's passing that out, I just want to mention a couple other things. One, we talked about let's as a key word for collaborate. A key word for consult is I. If you find yourself in that conversation with the coachee saying I, you're most likely consulting, okay? Another thing is that there's nothing wrong with being on any area of the continuum. What we want coaches to know is to be able to do is make a conscious effort to know where you are, and is this what you want to be doing? Okay, so it's really raising the consciousness of the coach. Looks like almost everybody has a card. Okay.
On those ideas. And then this activity is called Mix Trade Match. And so they're cooperative learning experts, but so they're not my ideas, they're not Tracy's ideas, we just wanted to give them credit.
Okay, so stand up. And if you would, try not to find somebody at your own table. So move across the room and let's mingle for a moment. Find somebody who can match your statement. An example. So what do you think that is an example of? Just to clarify, you're not matching words on the continuum. You're matching a word on the continuum with an example. What do you think this is an example of?
Could this be coaches? Oh, good. I'm with you.
But we have to realize.
Well, that's okay. You can be with this group. Maybe the cards didn't quite match. Okay, it looks like everybody has found a partner or trio in one case. Would anybody like to share their example? How about here? Share an example. What item on the continuum do you have?
Coach.
Coach, and what's an example?
What concerns might you have in implementing this assessment plan?
Okay. Does everybody understand why that's a coaching question? Mm-hmm. Another example.
We have evaluate.
And I have that went very well.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Of course.
Good. That's what you can say on our evaluations. That went very well. We'll take that. Okay, anybody else? Anybody over here?
We have collaborate.
Okay, good. An example.
How can we accomplish this goal?
What was the key word that lets you know? We. Great.
Let's.
Oh, another let's.
Oh, let's think about our plan of action.
Good. Anybody else?
Direct. Talk to the principal about your concerns.
Okay, what do we have here?
We have direct also.
Oh, another example of direct?
Take a few deep breaths.
Good. How about back here?
We had collaborate.
Okay, another example of collaborate?
How might we handle creating an assessment that will measure the learning of all students?
Great. Other examples? And you guys want to share yours?
What knowledge do you hope to gain as a result of this experience?
Put it all in their court. Anybody else over here want to share?
We'd evaluate. Okay. I like the way you ended the lesson.
According to me, right? According to me. Good. Anybody else?
We had consult. You may want to consider starting with this activity and then moving on to this activity.
It sounds like coaching sometimes when you're consulting because you're asking a question, but you're embedding what you think that they need to do. So that can be tricky. Yeah. Anybody else who didn't get a chance to share? Oh, over here.
We had consult, and it's have you tried grouping the students differently?
Have you tried? Yep, that's another kind of key phrase that lets you know you're probably in that mode. Thank you, everybody. You can have a seat. Experts, we're training them on the process of coaching. So what we really encourage, especially during the training, is for the coaches to practice staying in that coaching role. It is so challenging, a lot harder than you think, especially when you start developing the awareness of your language. But as a practice to stay in that coaching role.
And I think it's a lot harder when you have the content knowledge.
Yes.
If you're a literacy coach and you have a literacy background and you've implemented these things in your own classroom to stay in those peer coaching, in that peer coaching mode and just be a questioner, it's very, 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 very hard.
And this is going back to our keynote presenter this morning talking about clinical decision making. This is where the coach is making some decisions about your language. You know, if you have a new teacher and they do not have any strategies for this lesson, you don't want to keep questioning them until they cry. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to be so successful. So you might make a conscious decision to go back to consulting. But as soon as you can, you go back to coaching and putting it in their court so that they are really becoming self-directed learners. And again, with the model of evidence-based practices, there's a focus on the client's values, preferences, and needs. So as we've discussed coaching this morning, how do these practices really support a coachee's client's values and needs? I'm asking you. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you yet. Think about it. What about implementation? So there's better outcomes when coaching is used as a process and greater implementation, like we've talked about earlier. The coachee becomes more self-directed. It's about them. It's not about you as the coach. It's about the coach, a coachee, and where they want to go. And that's hard because we all have opinions, right? I'm sitting there in a conversation thinking, I need to tell Christy exactly, oh, this is what you should do, Christy. I'm not even listening to what she's saying anymore. But if I really engage in a coaching conversation, I have that active listening, which was brought up before. I'm paraphrasing, and I'm asking Christy questions so Christy can decide where she wants to go with that lesson. How empowered is she after that? How respected does she feel that I gave her the opportunity to determine that? And sometimes the coachee may go in a direction we don't want them to go, but there's learning in that, and there's value in that. And it truly is respecting them as a person. Did you have something, Sandra, to add? Okay. We put a picture, in all our pictures here, we did a picture that has signs without any words because it's not the coach defining for that person where they're going to go. It's the coachee defining for themselves where they want to go. And I think that about wraps up our talk for you this morning. We have an opportunity for you to ask any questions or provide comments. We very much appreciate your willingness to share your ideas and engage in this process this morning. We know we have a lot of expertise in the room as well, and thank you for that. Question, Karen? for the teams? Well, we have different training projects for behavior, multi-tier behavior supports, autism, reading, and math. And each grant is a little bit different, and they're changing this year. Our reading and math grants have gone out to some priority focus schools, that would like some additional funds to implement some new practices. But we assign coaches to work with our teams at our team training. So for autism, for example, teams will come to a training about 6 days out of the year, and we have coaches work with them at the training. And then this year, we're actually sending those coaches out into the schools to work with them and follow up and ask those coaching questions about implementation. So that'll happen for autism and for behavior this year. Thank you. Right, and if you're interested in capacity building coaching, our fall cohort is full, but we'll be offering another cohort starting in January. I believe it's 30th and 31st, and we have a sign-up sheet. So if you check more information, I'll just add your name to my list of individuals interested in obtaining more information, and you'll get those announcements about that training as well. And that's a 6-day training. We are from the Arizona Department of Education. And so we have our business cards over here too. So if you want to walk out and take a look at those, you can. We also have some other coaching resources for you to peruse. Jim Knight, as mentioned earlier, he compiled a book that discusses all different types of coaching and a whole chapter on the research on coaching. It's an excellent resource. In our training, we use this book, Mentoring Matters, by Laura Lipton and Bruce Wellman. Excellent resources and really the tools that you need to be an effective coach. Cognitive coaching, here's the book that talks about that. Instructional coaching, and a book by Joyce and Showers about staff development, student achievement through staff development. So we also have some flyers for you for our Promising Practices website. We're throwing them all over the table. And it's a website, and it has information on all different areas for administrators, paraprofessionals, parents, some strategies and resources that might be helpful for you to know. And on the back side is an advertisement for our Directors Institute that's coming up in August. It's for special education directors, but anybody in the field of special education, about the law, about new Common Core. It's this, yeah.
Not just the perspective of the classroom teacher. So it might be professional development. So it's pretty broad. There's a broad range of topics that are not just directed to the special education director.
Other questions before we finish up? Oh. Thank you, everybody, for your attention and engagement this morning.
I had a specific question that I don't have the answer to at this point, but if you had something specific you wanted to know about coaching, I can't guarantee you that we'll have the answer, but a lady asked me about what the research, whether there was any research on using cognitive coaching with adult learners, and not adult learners like us necessarily, but adult struggling learners, adults acquiring literacy skills. So those coming back to education after many years away from it. So if there's any specific information that you are requesting, we may be able to get it for you. So you can add that to the list. Okay, thank you very much.